Last summer, I worked for the Trump administration on a technicality. I was lucky enough to intern at a federal agency and work on policy and legislative analysis. I was even more lucky in that my colleagues came from a diverse set of backgrounds and beliefs, but we all got along wonderfully. However, from the beginning of the application process to today, there was a conflict between my personal political beliefs and my professional goals. Through this experience, I learned that we have an obligation to separate our political beliefs from our analysis of policy, and that we have a responsibility to work with or at least understand the policy coming from people that we disagree with, while continuing to advocate for our own political beliefs. In order to do this, we first have to discern what falls under each category: policy and politics. Now, policy is something that is or can be implemented. It's tangible. Things like congressional legislation and court decisions all fall under policy. And policy is something that affects everyone in this room, and it will for years to come. A particularly salient example of this is the Paris Agreement. Now, that's where we get into politics, which is a little bit different. Politics is the way that policy gets implemented. The slick talk of politicians and the organization of a gerrymandered district both fall, in various degrees, under politics. Now, this past summer, I had the opportunity to find out just where I stood on the incredibly blurry and nuanced line between policy I agreed with and politics I deeply opposed. So initially, I was a little worried. The plane ride to DC was basically me stewing in my misconceptions. I didn't know if I would be personally respected or feel professionally accomplished. And I didn't know if my acceptance of this job signaled my own moral failing. Of course, this is something that is not limited to my internship. It's a thought process a lot of us will have to go through when we enter the workforce. Now, I was happy in my intern bubble, but I was also acutely aware that the limited scope of my experiences meant that there was a depth of the administration I simply wasn't seeing. It's also worth noting here that I was interning at the Department of Agriculture, which has managed to be less controversial than other departments, so there was definitely a lot more going on than I ever had the chance to see. But I still felt guilt. How could I even intern for the US government during an administration I so deeply opposed? Isn't that the very definition of a hypocrite? This constricting mentality that working for something I didn't agree with meant I couldn't benefit from the experience took a while for me to overcome. Now, over the course of the summer, my supervisor became one of the best mentors I've ever had the chance to work with. And he helped me slowly chip away at these misconceptions. He helped me understand policy without the disorienting filter of politics, be more open-minded about the projects I was working on, and learn how to use my time as a learning experience, aimed just at understanding how the system works. The most impactful lesson I learned was that doing something you believe in, even if only 30% of it, results in what you wanted, is better than giving up, better than refusing to engage, and definitely better than letting someone else step in, someone who won't fight for what you believe in. This idea of doing everything you can instead of just everything took a while for me to accept, and even longer for me to see the value of. Unfortunately, college students are just beginning to form their ideologies, and we often see policies in black and white. A lot of us believe that in order to be accepted by our own group, we have to reject those outside that group. It's not enough to align with one side of political issues like abortion or gun control. We have to demonize the other side and reject the solutions that come from members of that side. This intense pressure to be all of one and nothing of the other, a pressure that comes from politics but slips into policy, affects not just the ideology we follow, but also the people we associate with. Now, I remember the weeks leading up to the 2016 presidential election, when I had the chance to talk to one of my friends about politics for the very first time. I remember learning that she was a Trump supporter and feeling confused and hurt. I was almost ready to let go of our entire friendship, but we ended up having a conversation that shifted my perspective, and through it, we came to the core of our differences. Her education depended on her family's stock in the coal industry. From her point of view, she was just trying to fund her way into something that we both valued, in education. She, in turn, saw that my safety and the safety of people who look like me was threatened by his toxic rhetoric. And that was something that she could empathize with. So, even though our opponents seem offensive, there's a reason they think the way they do. Now, that reason may be illogical. It may be awful. It may be rooted in fear or confusion or hope or hate. But whatever the reason, it's worth trying to find out. Because as soon as we do, we're that much closer to a conversation that actually goes somewhere. My experiences this past summer and in college taught me that I didn't need to accept someone else's beliefs, but I do need to find out where those beliefs come from. You can think someone's opinion is problematic, and in many cases, I hope you do. But even then, there's value in understanding why a person thinks the way they do. Understanding their background, their frustrations, and their lifestyle doesn't mean that you accept it. It simply means that you acknowledge it. And don't let go of your own beliefs in the process. But do realize that in order to push your ideas forward, your unflinching convictions have to come alongside this acknowledgement. After all, we're all just people trying to move in whatever way we think is the way forward. Now, there's a lot of nuance here, but that's okay. This is a delicate topic, and we live in a complicated world, and people can be confusing. But most people aren't inherently bad. And all of this gray means that it's even more important to be understanding and to be open to accepting other people's opinions and beliefs. Now, of course, I can't talk about college students and politics without bringing up last week's midterms. A lot of students and a lot of Texans were really disappointed. Talking to friends afterwards, I noticed the emphasis on the perceived negativities. But look at these numbers. Look at this voter turnout. Look at the women in Congress. Man, I'm proud of us. We didn't get everything, but we didn't get nothing either. Young people, no matter who they voted for, prove that we can engage in healthy political discussion and insightfully critique policies, and that our voice matters. For our generation, this engagement is not just something to encourage. It's going to define the policies we allow, and in that way, the world we live in. It's vital. I've seen how the policies being drafted today are going to impact the rest of our lives, even if the politicians drafting them never face the consequences. So it's our responsibility to do everything that we can to make our politics, our beliefs, and our values a part of our policies, because that is our shot at moving forward. Thank you.